Assassin? No, a hero. By Osamugiris. Read by AJ Morningstar. Part 3 of 3. Progress Check. On the days when Class 1A had regular sparring and training in foundational heroics when Aizawa taught instead of All Might, things usually went without a hitch. Aizawa was more strict with them than All Might was, but it ended up working out well for them. By the end of class, they would know the correct forms, new moves, and other fighting tricks that they didn't know before. Wiping the sweat from his brow, Izuku held out a hand to his partner on the ground. Tokoyami accepted the hand with a grunt, letting himself be pulled up and dusting himself off with his hands. Quirkless sparring was always hard for some of his classmates, and Izuku always felt a little bad when he would be partnered with one of said unfortunate classmates, considering he had been doing this type of thing for over a year now, and was much more experienced at it than them. Well thought, Midoriya, Tokoyami nodded. Izuku grinned. You too, Tokoyami. We should do it again sometime. I can totally help you out with learning better dodging techniques. I accept your offer. Thank you. With that said, Izuku followed the rest of his classmates toward the benches where their water bottles and bags were. He nearly drained the bottle as soon as he opened it, even though he'd barely broken a sweat in his fight. Nagi was always telling him he needed to hydrate more, so what better time? Izuku chuckled, wiping a bead of water from his chin. He glanced to his right when he noticed Sato looking at him curiously, and he raised an eyebrow. Something wrong? Sato flushed, embarrassed at getting caught. No, not at all. I was just wondering. What was that the other day in the cafeteria with you and that other guy? I've seen him around the Gen Ed hallways when I've walked to class before. Do you know each other? Izuku smirked, remembering just a few days ago when he'd humiliated Asuna at lunch. You could say that. Cryptic, Sero snorted. What'd he do to piss you off? He exists, Izuku hummed, nonchalant. Kidding, kidding. It's complicated. We went to middle school together. I was in his class in my first year when I transferred halfway through the first term. He, a friend of mine, and myself were all sort of academic rivals of a sort, and he and the other are still, since they're both in the business course now. But it was worse between he and I all through middle school. Was that bad? Ojiro asked. Izuku laughed. You have no idea. My middle school was one of the top in the country academic-wise, and his dad was the principal. He was top dog. I was supposed to be the dirt under his prissy little expensive shoes. It didn't stop after I transferred classes either. It just got worse. What about your friend, kiddo? Sue asked, a finger on her lips. He'll be fine. Izuku waved off the concern. Karma can handle himself. I just feel bad for any of their classmates who have to witness Asuano's pettiness in full force. It's a sight to behold, for sure. The question settled after that, and everybody finished up their break. As they were warming up for more rounds, with new partners this time, Izuku heard the doors to the gym open. He wasn't really paying attention, though, and he would regret it. Ah, Aizawa-san, Principal Nezu said cheerfully. Sorry for interrupting. We have a guest today who requested to come see one of your students' progress personally. Aizawa's voice was surprised when he spoke, but only those who were really paying close attention would notice. Lovro, it's been a while. What business do you have with one of my students? Izuku's stomach dropped. His head whipped towards the doors. Sure enough, Lovro stood with Principal Nezu on his shoulder. The man seemed irritated about it, but he said nothing, only stood with his hands folded behind his back and his usual blank, emotionless stare on his face. Izuku knew better, though. He silently crept backwards towards the exit doors on the other side of the gym. He only made it halfway before he was called out. Midoriya, where do you think you're going? Izuku winced. Why, Aizawa-sensei, why must you do this to me? He felt the intensity of Lovro's stare on him in an instant, and a bead of sweat formed on his forehead. Izuku, my pupil. Lovro nodded at him. You have kept up with your training, yes? Lovro-sensei! Izuku laughed nervously. Of course I have, sir. Please don't make me do suicide sprints. Come, show me. Sensei? Loro took a knife from his inner coat pocket and without warning threw it at him. Izuku heard his classmates around him gasping and yelling out for him, but Izuku simply caught it by the handle some centimeters from his face. Anxiety forgotten for a moment, Izuku grinned excitedly. Hey, my fixed blade! I thought I lost this. Where did you find it, Lovro-sensei? Lovro chuckled darkly, and everyone in One Eye took a small step back. You left it on mission in Moscow. Careless. Izuku jumped, tense once more. Sorry, Sensei, it won't happen again. His response was met with a grunt, and Lovro turned to Aizawa. Eraserhead. Aizawa raised his eyebrow. Yes, fight my pupil. I wish to see his progress. He's a kid, Aizawa deadpanned. I'm a seasoned underground pro hero. His comment went unheard. Izuku, get in stance. You remember what I taught? Izuku's eyes widened and he nodded jerkily. Yes, Lovro-sensei, I remember. Lovro's eyes glinted. Good. Show Hiro your skill. Doing as instructed, Izuku widened his stance between his feet, adjusted his grip on his knife, and got in stance. Aizawa looked like he wanted to crawl into his sleeping bag and ignore everyone's existence, and Izuku related. He watched his teacher approach slowly, getting into his own sparring stance. Are you sure about this? Aizawa asked Loro. When the pro-hero turned his head, believing that they hadn't started yet, since no signal was called out, Izuku lunged. His first strike was met sloppily since his opponent had been distracted, and Izuku felt his brain going into assassin mode. Every emotion dropped itself from his face scarily fast, and Aizawa seemed surprised by this. Two weapons keep opponents' eyes on wands. Distract. Strike. Izuku twisted his body, aiming a quirk-powered kick at Aizawa that was quickly countered by erasure, and Izuku mentally grinned. With Aizawa's attention keeping his quirk erased, Izuku dropped his knife to the floor. The pro's eyes instantly went to the weapon, and Izuku, faster than anyone in the room could see, dashed forward and struck his hands together in front of Aizawa's face. Clap. In seconds, Aizawa was down on the ground, clutching his ears and trying to shake the confusion from his head. Izuku took the advantage of it and wrapped Aizawa's wrists in his own capture weapon, leaning down to pick his knife back up and pointing it between his teacher's eyes. Do you yield? Izuku tilted his head. Aizawa blinked, a mix of dry eye from using erasure and the shock of being bested in less than a minute by a teenager. I yield. Izuku lowered his arm and tucked his knife into the back of his shorts like he did when he used guns on missions. He unraveled the capture weapon from his teacher's wrist and held out a hand to help him up. Aizawa accepted the hand slowly, like it was something dangerous, and Izuku grinned outwardly this time. How is that, Lovro-sensei? He turned to his old mentor. Lovro crossed his arms. Better than last time. Bought the weapon too. Good use of surroundings. Izuku pumped his fist in the air. Whoop! Does this mean I get a free pass on the sprints? No, Lovro smirked. Principal gave permission to take you outside then fields 2 minutes. Do not be late, or double sprints. Izuku groaned and rushed to get his bag, running out the doors with Lovro walking calmly behind him. The rest of the class and Aizawa turned to Nedzu in question. Mind explaining? The pro asked. The stoat grinned. Nope. Class 1A collectively groaned, because of course he wouldn't answer. Just another thing to add to the list of the mysteries of Midoriya Izuku they had hanging in the dorm common rooms.